Right, we're going to move straight on to the next session. We're going to invite Emma Cosmin in, who's a senior campaigner for Centre for Progressive Change, and she's going to discuss about statutory sick pay, which has been raised a couple of times in the chat, the webinar chat. So welcome, Emma, and I will just let you introduce yourself and get on with it.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for your time today and for the opportunity to talk to you about sick pay reform. Lovely to see you, Wayne and Paul. I'm Emma. I'm senior campaigner at the Centre for Progressive Change. I was previously a policy officer at the TUC, so I've had the pleasure to work with your union a little bit before, but would love to learn more and especially hear the experiences of supply teachers in relation to sick pay. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Safe Sick Pay campaign itself, and then it'd be great to get everyone's thoughts on any questions, connections, and ideas for taking this forward in your union and in your context. So a bit about sick pay. The first really important thing to say is that nobody ever wants to get sick, but it is the reality. It's part of our working lives that sometimes we will need periods to rest and recover for sickness or for injury. And we all deserve to know that we can do that, that we can take the time to get better when we need to without financial stress or falling into debt. But for a third of people in the workforce, we rely on statutory sick pay, which is so low that it's nowhere near enough to pay the bills. And to get any sick pay in the first place, we need to lose 3 days of pay first. And on top of that, a further 1.3 million workers, mainly people with multiple jobs like cleaners, carers, or parents who are juggling childcare with work. These people slip through the cracks and get no sick pay at all. And women are twice as likely as men to be in that bracket and miss out on any entitlement to any sick pay at all. But the biggest issue is that statutory sick pay is set at just £116 a week. And that's a rate that nobody can live on. It's the lowest statutory rate of any rich country, and it works out as a quarter of the real living wage, so less than £3 an hour for a full-time worker. And of course, the last thing that people need when they're sick is worry about the bills. So this causes huge problems, and being sick enough to need to be off work is never easy in the first place. But it's even worse when you're spending that time having to worry about putting food on the table or heating your home. And of course, we all know your cost of living, your bills don't drop if you're unlucky enough to need time off work sick. In fact, it can be more expensive to face a period of illness. So this means we either go into work sick and get more unwell, or we end up at home worrying about money and being unable to pay the bills. So this puts our recovery, ours and other people's health and well-being at risk, and it can cause more disruption to our lives and to our work. So in a recent poll of 2,000 low and middle income workers, people were asked what it would mean to their finances to take a significant amount of time over 2 weeks off sick from work. And a huge majority, so 91% of them, said it would cause some or significant financial pressure. And in the same survey, 60% of workers shared that they had had to work through a period of sickness because they couldn't afford to take sick leave. And working through illness, because of that problem of worrying about making ends meet, means that people can become more unwell. So a really common story we hear is working on an injury that then worsens. And of course, we're also risking spreading illnesses to others. So our campaign is calling for reform of statutory sick pay. We want safe sick pay for everyone from the first day people are off sick and at a rate that they can live on. We think it should be set at the real living wage as at a minimum. And a recent report by WPI Economics shows that sick pay reforms could result in a net positive 4.1 billion financial benefit to government, to the NHS, and to the wider economy every year. So let's talk about where Labour are on this. I know you've just heard a little bit about the New Deal. So Labour have committed to extending sick pay to everyone, and bringing it in from the first day of sickness. But we also urgently need to see that rate increased and increasing the rate of statutory sick pay, that £116 a week is what has not been committed to. So the employment bill, which will be bringing Labour's New Deal for working people into law, is coming to Parliament over the next couple of weeks. So we have this opportunity as that bill is passing through Parliament, through the different stages of debates and going through the parliamentary process. We have this opportunity to go MP by MP and asking every MP to sign up as a champion to back raising the rate, so that as many MPs as possible can be ready to raise this issue in debates on the employment bill. We have 100 MPs that are already formally backing the campaign and say that they agree that statutory sick pay, that rate should be higher. That's across all different parties, but we do have some people signed up, in quite senior roles in the Labour Party, and we hope that we can raise this issue and kind of get many more politicians and public figures on board. We have some digital tools, which I'll just post in the chat in a second, which you can use if you'd like to write to your MP. And we've also got a tool for those who would like to write to your local paper. So these are kind of automatic digital tools, and would really love if you to kind of take a look, but also share them through your networks if you know any folks that might like to take action on the statutory sick pay campaign. If you'd be interested to do a bit more, there's also exciting opportunities to raise this with your MP through MP surgeries, but also for those who might be involved in your local Labour Party, we have a template motion that can be taken to local Labour Party meetings to raise the issue, as well as, of course, can be used in union settings. So that's all for me for now, but I'd love to kind of take any questions, ideas, reflections.
Yeah, thanks for that to Emma. So if there's any more questions that people want to ask, I'll put them in chat or the Q&A session. We have got one from Tom Wolf. As a part-time supply teacher, I work 3 days per week. Would I be entitled to full statutory sick pay, or would I only get the pro rata level of SSP?
I'd say double check this for sure, but my understanding is that it would be a prorated rate. So that's also, yeah, a really important thing to raise. But if anyone's going through kind of specific circumstances, what I'd point you to is your local Citizens Advice Bureau, because Citizens Advice Bureaus actually do loads of work on this of helping people to get what they're entitled to. Many people, don't know that they are entitled to that kind of pull-through rate, and there are these kind of gaps in the system. It's also a massive issue of enforcement because, even though it is just that tiny amount that nobody can live on, you got to bet employers will do their best not to cough up that amount.
Thank you. The next question from Andrew Tessier. From an admin point, if I'm signed up with more than one agency, who do I apply for SSP? Not that we've ever done it, given it because it's never, just like you mentioned, never used it yet. But who would he claim it from?
Yes. So this is a massive issue in the design of statutory sick pay. So if you have multiple employers, unfortunately, you'll generally fall through the cracks. So if any single employer pays you £123 a week, it's called the lower earnings limit, then you're entitled to statutory sick pay. But you can only receive it through one agency at a time. So it would essentially be a case of picking the one, if there is one that usually gives you more days. But that's one of the main issues that we really want to raise, and definitely something that's worth, if you're able to take the time to write a letter to your MP or to your local paper, it's definitely a really important issue to raise. And yeah, there's just massive kind of demographic issues in that. So we know that people who are likely to fall through the cracks and be excluded from any sick pay at all, much more likely to be women, people of colour, disabled people.
Thanks, Emma. It's the one thing I thought of when you talked about people having two or three different jobs. It's like similar with this, rather two or three different potential ways of working. I just made another comment. That explains why I never get it. Thank you. And I don't get that lower limit of pay. Right. Thanks for that, Andrew. Paul wants to come in on that.
It was just to say, as you've been talking about these things, I have published where all of Emma's excellent resources can be found because we support this campaign. So there is a section on our website. If you type in statutory sick pay, I've put the link in. I've answered some of the questions because some of those questions, quite rightly, really good questions, have been answered. So it does depend on your contract. You could technically claim SSP from different agencies, but it's all about what you're earning, when it's earned. SSP, is quite rightly pointed out, is calculated based on the days you work. So if you work 2 days out of a week, it's based on 2 divided by the amount you get. So all of these things hopefully have been put in the chat, but I would encourage people to look at our website because hopefully the questions that have been raised are there with examples to help and assist.
Thanks for that, Paul. And stay there. Come back. It's just raised one question there for me personally. Obviously, I'm not a supply teacher anymore, so it won't affect me anymore. What you just said there, if you work 2 days a week, what if one work you week, one work? Is it an average over a certain time? Because obviously you might work 1 day, 1 week, 4 days the next, 3 days, back to 2. You're on mute.
I think Emma's going to slap me down for being incorrect here, but I think it's all about the qualifying week. I think you're right, and Emma raised this point. The law as created doesn't seem to reflect the dynamic working relationships that people in the UK have now. So there is an argument, which I think Emma and her organisation quite cogently make, that this is unfit for purpose. So I think if we could get changes to, how many days you need to wait, what the rate of pay is, then I think there's a wider debate around, well, does this actually suit how people work? Because as you quite rightly pointed out, if people work 1 day, 1 week, nothing the next, well, what's the qualifying week? And it's interesting because when you look at the legislation around holiday pay, that's actually quite good in some respects because holiday pay is often calculated, in terms of a look back period, which excludes weeks when you don't work. So if you had a sick pay scheme that looked in a similar way at when Wayne Broom is sick, what was the last period in time he worked, and you exclude weeks where he didn't work, then the qualifying week would always be to your benefit. So I think there's a debate to be had about how we can further progress the campaign around SSP as we move on from the day one, right, which we know Labour are committed to the increase in the pay. The increase in the amount of money, Emma is quite spot on, is the key fundamental issue. It's derisory, but it's derisory for statutory maternity pay, paternity pay, and it prevents people accessing leave, pay, and sick pay when they need it. So, but I think for agency workers, there's a debate around we need to look at a broader thing around the qualifying weeks, how that's calculated, when you look back. So I think there's a lot more to be done on this area. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to say I was just thinking similar to like the furlough payments when we went through COVID. It was like based on the average last 13 weeks. That was just my thoughts on that one. Right, we do have a couple of people that have got their hand up as well. So I'm going to ask Tara to unmute Yvonne Wood. She does have a question she wants to ask. Yvonne, go ahead. You need to unmute yourself, though, Yvonne. No, well, I'll let you look at that. We'll go to Andrew then. Oh, don't right, Yvonne, you've just unmuted yourself. Yeah, ask away. You can talk to us, Yvonne. Can't hear you. If you just want to put your question, all right. Thank you, Yvonne. Just seeing that you've just said sticking controls. Right, thanks a lot. Andrew, then, could you unmute Andrew? We'll get there eventually. Have you got a question, Andrew? You need to unmute yourself if you do. That looks like we're having issues with that. I will go back to Q&A. Oh, you don't have a mic. You'll have to, sorry then, Andrew, you'll have to type your question in again. We do have a question from it's just got anonymous attendee. What would you do to access it generally? Write an email to your agency asking for SSP.
Yeah, see, it's claimed through a government website. What I would say is that it's always, I'd say, it's worth checking your terms and conditions, and definitely check with Citizens Advice Bureau for any kind of particular circumstances. If you really want to depress yourself, research, pop into Google statutory sick pay in essentially any other well-off country, any other European country, or Australia, Canada, New Zealand, just to kind of give you a sense of how we compare. So in Germany, if you're unlucky enough to fall ill and need some time off work, you would have 70% of your last known wages, and that would be guaranteed to you for 2 years. And you would have the employer has a duty to hold your job open for you. So that obviously relates into lots of other workplace campaigns, whether it's your reasonable adjustments, occupational health, union rights. So it's obviously not one silver bullet, but we think that a decent rate of statutory sick pay that operates effectively can be something that helps people to be able to rest and recover and get back to work. And we just hear such awful stories across a range of kind of different conditions, diseases. And actually, I had a fab conversation the other day with some of the doctors' unions, who they're just really angry because doctors are routinely be saying to somebody, you need to rest up for 6 weeks, you need to rest up for 2 months, and like people can't afford to. People haven't got the workplace rights to be able to rest up. So doctors' orders are routinely being flouted. It's not through anyone's fault. It's the design of the system that's very, very old-fashioned, as you pointed out, Paul. It's not designed around the current sort of world of work. And another issue where it's kind of not really designed around sort of current practice is that when you are ready to return to work, statutory sick pay is either on or off. So it's very black and white. It doesn't taper, and many workplaces will have a kind of phased return to work. So that's also, another area that needs looked at. But we think the kind of urgent action should be getting up to, if not that real living wage level, where we all think as a principal point, that wage should be, then, getting it up to a level where nobody's on poverty in that rate. To give you a sense of things of sort of how low that current £116 an hour is, to get it up to the level of statutory maternity leave is far more than doubling the current rate. And we know that statutory maternity leave, of course, it's a whole other campaign that rate is also so low. But statutory sick pay is just set way lower than any other kind of rate that we look to in public life. It's and because it's so much lower than your kind of basic rates of social security, it does incentivize people, kind of not to. People often are, not able to kind of make that journey back into work, and we know that a decent rate, would kind of help keep people well, keep people in work. And we've all done it, right? Where you're feeling rubbish, you push through, you make yourself more sick. And when you kind of think about the risk, for what we learned through the pandemic in terms of the risk of long COVID, it's just a very broken system. So I would love it if people would take the time to write to your MP or to engage your local politicians on this issue for sure.
Thanks for that, Emma. And I'm going to say I would really advise people to do that. Send your letters into the MPs. Any other supply teachers you know that are not on today, get them to do it as well. Anything that would make it better for any agency workers rather than just supply teachers, anybody. And anybody that doesn't get the same benefits as some other workers do. I thought it was a little slip of the tongue there when you said £116 an hour. I think you meant a week.
Oh, if only. Sorry,
If
a
only
week,
it was
yes.
that, we'd all be on the sick. There's no other questions at the moment. I'm just going to give people a couple of minutes to see if there's anything else coming in. But where are we with this campaign at the moment? Are people being sympathetic to your campaign at the moment?
Yeah, so great question. We've obviously got these two big wins kind of in partnership with the union movement. Fingers crossed and kind of trying to protect that in the development of the employment bill, which is removing that issue where people can fall through the cracks and not earn enough with any one employer. So we will, fingers crossed, be getting sick pay for everyone, for all employees, and sick pay that starts from day one of illness. And these are, massive things, massive learnings from the pandemic. But the risk is that we make it through this employment bill process and we're still at the bottom of all the international league tables on the rate of statutory sick pay. We do find that once you kind of talk to MPs about it, whether that's backbenchers, cabinet, yeah, across all different parties, it is kind of common sense politics, and it's also the employer pays, right, not the government. So in a way, it's, we would argue it's a very sensible policy, looking at kind of where the Labour Party are at the moment. So it really is a case of getting in front of people. Generally, once we kind of get a little bit of people's time, a politician will sort of look at it and go, yes, this makes sense. It creates money for the economy. It's important for NHS waiting lists. We know that if people are off sick, for example, waiting for a surgery or waiting for treatment, that will kind of help with all the sort of different priorities at the moment in public life. And as I say, we've got over 100 MPs signed up at the moment. We were actually in 5 of the different parties' manifestos. So it feels like there is sort of consensus. If you want to have a little look as well, it's the Safe Sick Pay campaign. There's a lot more articles on our website, a series of blogs about how sick pay affects different protected characteristics, as well as some of the kind of financial realities. We also just did a briefing on how the statutory sick pay system is failing cancer patients, which we developed in partnership with a number of the biggest cancer charities. And there's some really powerful stories and recommendations in there as well.
Thank you for that. We have got one more question coming before I just mention one last thing before we do finish today on this session. I'm due to have an operation and may be off for 6 months. I've been working every week for 5 days at the same place for nearly 2 years through an agency, but it is booked on a weekly basis. Paul might need to come on this one as well. This means that I'm not currently on a booked assignment when I go off on sick. Do I get SSC for the full 6 months?
Yeah, I'll pass that one to Paul, and also just wish you the best for the operation and hope it goes well for you. And Citizens Advice Bureau, your local Citizens Advice will also be a really good go-to, because they'll be able to help with kind of the whole range and how everything fits in together.
Yeah, I hope Paul comes in. While we're waiting for Paul to come in, I did email somebody, put a message in the webinar chat early to an individual, but I'll mention it to everybody. If you do have any financial concerns for being on the sick and you are suffering financially, people are asking, is there a pot of money? Well, we do have a pot of money, but we call it benevolence. So if you are having any financial issues, you can contact your regional centre, who will get a benevolence officer to contact you regarding any financial issues you've got. Paul, did you hear the question I mentioned?
Yes, I did. So if I'm right, the person has been working repeatedly in an employment situation.
In the same school
so
for nearly
they've
2
got
years.
5. If we cut to the chase, they've got 5 days a week's work over X amount of time. I think they need to go to their employer, the agency, and say they do think they are entitled. You're entitled to it for a period of up to 28 weeks. So they should be entitled to a payment for each week up to 28 weeks when they're off. That's it. They do have to return to work for, I believe, 56 days before they can then have another entitlement. And I don't know if the entitlements can relate to the same illness or injury. I'm not going to profess to be the expert on that. I think the member should go to their local caseworker. They should contact their local regional centre and make provide all the information, because from what the colleague is saying, if they've been working, and this is a key thing, have they been working? They need to look at their contract, but the law around this takes a very broad definition of what an employee is, which captures agency workers. But if they've met the threshold in terms of are they earning over a period of time, weekly, over this amount, over that time, I think they're entitled to it. I would need to be convinced by the agency as to why they think they're not. So the member should contact their local secretary, caseworker, regional centre, whichever one's the most appropriate, and speak to them and present the information, and we'll see where we go.
Okay, right. Thanks for that, and thanks for your time, Emma.
Yes, thank you, Emma.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, folks. I've put my email address in the chat there
I've
if
just
anyone
seen
wants
that.
to get in
So
touch.
the email address there if you want to send anything. Right, thanks a lot. So I'm going to close this session now. Our next session, first workshop, will start at 11:15. So we'll see you back at 11:15.